So again, thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment. Now let's learn, let's build, and let's fight. Tonight we begin with Haiti and the lessons and the impact of the Haitian slave rebellion. And Cecilia will be giving our update on Haiti, our history lesson on Haiti. Cecilia joined the PSL after attending the first protest for Palestine in DC with the party. She was inspired by the PSL's dedication to working class people and each comrade's deep commitment to showing up for our people when it matters most. Cecilia continues her work with the party as both a firm belief in a socialist revolution and an expression of her love for the people. Let's welcome Ceci.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
Hello, my name is Cecilia. I'm very happy to be here. I'm going to be talking about the Haitian Revolution today. So, in the fight for Black liberation, we're reminded of the contagion that is revolutionary spirit. In the earliest inception of colonialism, when millions of Africans were stolen from their homes and enslaved for their labor, so was the earliest inception of revolution and the unrelenting pursuit of freedom and justice. I want to walk us through the Haitian Slave Rebellion, a pivotal piece in the Black liberation movement. We should be learning the context of the Haitian Revolution because the U.S. continues to set its sights on exploiting and oppressing this nation. Most recently, the Trump administration had ordered temporary protective status for thousands of Haitians across the U.S. to expire in early September of this year. That has now been pushed back, but only until February 2026. Leaving no pathway or guarantee that TPS will be renewed after this date. This is a local fight. We have over 10,000 Haitian immigrants in Indiana, many on TPS status. So we must arm ourselves with the knowledge of why imperialist forces are so focused on this island nation. Tonight, we'll highlight key tactics used by the ruling class to quell the global enthusiasm that is generated when people win, and lessons that we can pull for our struggle ahead for Black liberation. Before Haiti was an independent nation, it was known as San Domingo, a French colony on the western part of Hispaniola. Hispaniola now is a small island between Cuba and Puerto Rico, but in the late 15th century, it was occupied by Spain in the east and France in the west. When European colonizers initially arrived to the Caribbean, they inflicted disease on the Taino and Tarinago people and enslaved them into brutal working conditions. These two factors killed most of the indigenous population in the Caribbean, and that, combined with the growing number of European settlements and sugar plantations, then compelled the Spanish and the Portuguese, and later the French and the British, to import enslaved Africans to the Caribbean. The brutality only grew from there. Over a 10-year period in the early 1700s, the number of Africans who were shipped to San Domingo to labor over sugar plantations grew from 47,000 to 80,000, and then escalated to over 465,000 enslaved people within the next 50 years. San Domingo was one of the harshest slave regimes in the Americas. C.L.R. James adds a description of these conditions in his book, The Black Jacobins, writing, There were about 100 men and women of different ages, all occupied in digging ditches in a cane field, the majority of them naked or covered with rags. The sun shone down with full force on their heads. Sweat rolled from all parts of their bodies, their limbs weighed down by the heat, fatigued with the weight of their picks and by the resistance of the clayed soil, baked hard enough to break their implements, strained themselves to overcome every obstacle. A mournful silence reigned. Exhaustion was stamped on every face, but the hour of rest had not yet come. The pitiless eyes of the manager patrolled the gang, and several foremen armed with long whips moved periodically between them, giving stinging blows to all who, worn out by fatigue, were compelled to take a rest, men or women, young or old. The inhumane conditions that enslaved people experience are often left out of textbooks. Enslaved people were regularly whipped to death, underfed, housed in huts like animals. These devastating conditions meant that the mortality rate for men, women, and children were at an all-time high in Haiti. When learning about the development of Haiti, the economic rationale is explained away with tables and charts, figures, masking the true horrors of capitalist development. with workers, specifically Black and brown people, as collateral damage. CLR James writes that there was no ingenuity that fear or a depraved imagination could devise, which was not employed to break their spirit and satisfy the lusts and resentment of their owners and guardians. The catalyst for the Haitian Revolution, though far from the reason, was France's own political turmoil against the monarchy. Economically fueled by the slave trade and slavery, the supportive administration of the monarchy could not manage the finance in France. They were wasteful and incompetent, and that mixed with the noble class and the church bleeding the peasantry dry left France in an unstable position ready for revolution. In Paris, the masses came up against the king in the storming of the Bastille, which compelled the bourgeois to do two things. First, to create a national guard to protect their interests, strictly excluding the poor. And second, they drew up a declaration of the rights of man and the citizen to undermine the royal administration, stating that all men were born equal and free. These ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity were championed by the French people, and when those ideals reached Saint Domingo, the enslaved people thought that white slaves in France had risen, killed their masters, and were now enjoying the fruits of the earth. Liberty, equality, fraternity. These were the words that sparked revolutionary hope for enslaved people living in Saint Domingo. Messages and stories of the revolution traveled quickly throughout the region, and within a month, 40,000 people were revolting in Saint Domingo. It was an absolute sweep of the old ways. Armies of ex-slaves, led by leaders like Toussaint Louverture, fought Spanish and British forces and destroyed colonies. Ex-slaves killed their masters, burned plantations to the ground. In 1790, Napoleon tried to restore plantation slavery using the French army, and they were met with another determined Black guerrilla army that defeated the colonizers once again. Haiti became an independent nation on January 1st, 1804. Yeah, we can cheer for Haiti, yes! Today, we root the Haitian Revolution firmly in the long legacy of struggle for Black liberation, one that widens our scope as part of the broader international struggle against colonial domination and racial oppression. We're talking about people who overcame the conditions and horrors of slavery, who overthrew the most profitable slave society in the world. Haiti's emergence as the first independent nation ruled by formerly enslaved people was significant for banning slavery and supporting other revolutions for oppressed communities. In the 20th century, Caribbean consciousness emerged with an anti-imperialist focus and a call for Black power that was deeply connected to the movement in the United States. In many ways, because the Caribbean was seen as the backyard of US imperialism, Caribbean-born and descended people in the region and in the US were exposed to the conditions, contradictions, and crises of capitalism. In fact, many prominent Black radicals in the US were of Caribbean descent or born. This revolution inspired other Caribbean countries and slaves in the US to examine their own oppression and work towards taking power. For example, the most well-known rebellion of enslaved people in US history, Nat Turner's Rebellion in 1831. Have y'all heard of that before? Yeah, I love that. Okay, love the nod. On August 21st, 1831, Nat Turner led a group of 6 slaves to freedom in Southampton, Virginia. They killed their slaver, Joseph Travis, and his family before traveling to other plantations to free more enslaved people. Gathering supplies, money, and weapons as they went, Nat Turner led around 70 people to liberation and eliminated over 55 white slave owners and their families. The Haitian Revolution is a reminder that the global wealth system created today could not exist without the exploitation and blood of Black people, and the reverberations of imperialism still echo here in the United States. We can say the same for the ways the ruling class respond to this successful overturning of power. Because Haiti's freedom challenged US slavery, Jefferson banned trade in 1806 with certain parts of the island. In 1824, South Carolina Senator Robert Haynes said, "Our policy concerning Haiti is plain. We can never acknowledge her independence." The US continued to isolate Haiti, fearing revolution would spread here. The US held out until 1862, 58 years later, to recognize Haiti as an independent nation. France took a different approach and was willing to recognize their independence for a price. They extorted Haiti for 150 million francs and threatened another invasion if they didn't pay. Haiti had no choice but to comply, and they were in the midst of recovering from their independence war. The debt was not meant for infrastructure or loans. It was meant to reimburse the slaveholders for their lost property. Haiti submitted to the predatory loans from French banks that began 122 years of financial enslavement. By the 1840s, 80% of Haiti's national budget was directed towards serving this unjust debt. France continued to increase the amount owed, making Haiti borrow at very high interest rates from banks such as Rothschild's. And in total, by 1947, nearly $21 billion was paid to France, leaving Haiti with near nothing to run their country effectively. This systematic looting prevented Haiti from investing in schools, hospitals, or infrastructure, locking them into a permanent underdevelopment. But back to Nat Turner's rebellion, we can see more legislation being a tool of the ruling class. So for example, slave owners and Southern legislators who had pressed heavily for states' rights to own slaves completely changed their tune, pushing through a federal law called the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 that would require federal officials to return escaped former slaves to their masters, even if they were found in free states. The weaponization of legislation is something that consistently undercuts and threatens struggles won and the Black liberation movement overall. We saw it again in the late 1860s with Nixon's Law and Order campaign that cracked down on revolutionary organizations, expanded military and police forces, and increased spending on corrections. Joe Biden spearheaded the passage of the 1994 crime bill that had resulted in thousands of Black men being sent to prison. We're currently witnessing the Trump administration deploy the National Guard and Trump's administration's deployment of the National Guard and federal militarized police, which has terrorized Haitian and Dominican immigrants along with Asians and Latinos. As comrades, our orientation toward the ruling class's legislation, especially surrounding justice, law, and order, is to recognize that the base, the anchor of these policies and procedures is the economic principle of capitalism. And capitalism benefits from a society that is racist towards Black people because imperialism exists to uphold and contribute to the wealth of billionaires. In a similar vein, the tactics endorsed by the ruling class, like following proper channels or talking to your representatives for change, are often laced with these paternalistic notions of civility or patience. If reactionary figures were to comment on the Haitian Revolution, they might condemn the killing of slave owners or attempt to demonize people fighting for liberation because of the tactics they had at their disposal. In the 1960s, the Black Panther Party was deemed a terrorist organization because they were trying to liberate and mobilize Black Americans to fight against capitalism. In 2020, when the Black Lives Matter movement, we heard calls for peaceful protesting and labeling many protests as riots and implementing curfews across the country. Globally, we're seeing the same rhetoric being used by many conservatives and reactionaries, calling, for example, partial occupation of Gaza, or proposing Palestinians engage in a two-state solution with a colonizing entity. Many students, organizers, and comrades are being targeted for their solidarity with Palestine, and we see that happening throughout Black liberation movements. In the struggle for liberation, the people who are being oppressed are never the first to commit violence. Paulo Freire, the Brazilian philosopher who wrote Pedagogy of the Oppressed, asks us, how oppressed people could be the initiators if they themselves are the result of violence? If we look at the true perpetrators of violence, it's written on the walls of every liberation struggle. With every tool and resource at their disposal, the ruling class creates and recreates a system that exploits, neglects, and brutalizes Black people. And in doing so, we reach my last tactic that I want to pull from the Haitian Revolution, the battle of ideas. The ruling class historically suppresses progressive movements and fights for liberation through severe propaganda campaigns and revision of revolutionary movements. How many times have the Black liberation movement of the 1960s been diluted to a faux juxtaposition between two great men, MLK Jr.'s nonviolent approach versus Malcolm X's militancy? Even within the Haitian Revolution itself, the tenets of life, liberty, and fraternity were an attempt for the bourgeois class to weaken the monarchy, not liberate the French working people. This rings true for our own US Constitution, taught to us in school as a document freeing all people from British rule, when in reality it was only ever drafted to protect the ruling class, and still today. The vision of a movement defines a movement. We've seen movements get co-opted by reactionary forces, infiltrated by the CIA, and most severely, repackaged as insular issues. One of the most successful tactics that the ruling class has pushed is that Black liberation is a Black person issue, and that across race and gender, solidarity will never and has never been built. The truth is that the ruling class is terrified of multinational solidarity and has crumbled under pressure when workers work together. When slavery was finally abolished in the United States, Karl Marx wrote that there was finally potential for an independent movement of workers. He wrote, "Labor cannot emancipate itself in the white skin where the Black skin is branded." The Haitian Revolution was a true people's revolution that completely swept away the colonial powers of their time. Through militancy, an unrelenting spirit of justice and freedom, and the dogged belief that the old world can no longer exist and so a new one must be built, Haitian people changed the material conditions of their world in little more than a generation. The Black liberation struggle continues to be a compass for workers everywhere, reminding us that with every tool at their disposal, the ruling class will never create a world that Black people need or deserve. It takes a multinational working class of all genders and races to create a world that we need. Capitalism thrives on competition and divides, which further breeds violence and exploitation against all working class people. We're reminded and inspired by the revolutionaries of Haiti to continue to push back against a system that puts profit over people. The fight is long from over, and it will not happen overnight, and we will continue to build solidarity with one another using the lessons of revolutionaries of Haiti as we continue to push for the rights of immigrants, Black liberation, and the liberation of working class people. Thank you.